After 15 years of apartment living and careful saving, I had finally done it. I purchased my dream home in Oak Ridge Estates, a picturesque suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and carefully maintained properties. The two-story colonial with navy blue shutters and a wraparound porch represented everything I had worked toward all these years. My very own piece of the American dream, complete with a white picket fence and a garden that would soon display my favorite perennials. I moved in during early spring, when the neighborhood dogwoods were coming into full bloom. The weather was perfect for unpacking and settling in. Each morning, I woke up excited to explore another corner of my new home. The previous owners had maintained the property well, but I had so many ideas to make it truly mine. I started with painting the living room a warm sage green and replacing the outdated kitchen hardware with brushed nickel fixtures. During those first few weeks, neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves. The Johnsons from across the street brought over a homemade apple pie. The elderly couple next door, the Patels, gifted me with a small potted plant for good luck. Almost everyone seemed genuinely friendly and welcoming. I noticed how they all mentioned the homeowners association with a mixture of respect and slight apprehension. "The HOA keeps our property values high," Mr. Johnson explained while his wife nodded in agreement. "Just make sure you read the rule book carefully." The rule book turned out to be a 47-page binder of regulations covering everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the specific shade of white allowed for fence painting. I studied it diligently, determined to be a good community member. The monthly HOA fee seemed reasonable for the amenities provided: a community pool, well-maintained walking trails, and seasonal landscaping throughout common areas. I met other neighbors at my first HOA meeting, held in the community center. Most introduced themselves warmly, though I noticed a curious pattern. When a particular woman entered the room, conversations quieted noticeably. People straightened their posture and nodded deferentially as she passed. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair styled in an immaculate bob, her clothing expensive but understated. My introduction to this woman, whom I would later come to know as Karen, came exactly 30 days after I moved in. I was planting new rose bushes along my front walkway when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find her standing there, clipboard in hand, a practiced smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Hello, I am Patricia Winters, HOA president," she announced without waiting for me to speak. "But everyone calls me Karen. I wanted to personally welcome you to our community and go over a few concerns." Her gaze drifted pointedly to my front yard, where gardening tools lay scattered on the grass. "I notice you have been doing some unauthorized landscaping. Any external modifications require HOA approval before implementation, and garden equipment should not be visible from the street at any time." I apologized, explaining I was still learning the rules. She nodded with what appeared to be understanding, but something in her expression suggested she was cataloging my infractions rather than accepting my explanation. Before leaving, she handed me a yellow form, an official warning regarding the unauthorized plantings. It seemed excessive for such a minor issue, but I brushed it off as typical HOA formality. What I did not realize then was that this interaction was merely the opening move in what would become an increasingly hostile neighborhood chess match. The roses I planted that day would bloom beautifully that summer, but my peaceful relationship with the HOA president had already begun to wither. 3 months passed relatively smoothly. I completed several small renovation projects, always making sure to submit the proper forms for approval first. Occasionally, I received notices for minor infractions. My trash can left visible from the street for an hour too long, or leaves not raked quickly enough after a storm. While annoying, These seemed like standard HOA matters that all residents dealt with. Then came the June edition of the neighborhood newsletter. Printed on pastel blue paper and distributed to every mailbox, it contained the usual community announcements, pool opening times, landscaping reminders, and upcoming events. But one announcement stood out from the rest, taking up nearly an entire page with a decorative border. The HOA is pleased to announce the upcoming wedding of Madison Winters, daughter of our esteemed President Patricia Winters, to be held in the Winters backyard on Saturday, August 12th. The community is asked to be accommodating of temporary disruptions during this joyous occasion. In the following weeks, I witnessed a flurry of activity at Karen's property 3 houses down from mine. Large delivery trucks blocked the cul-de-sac for hours, unloading tents, tables, and other equipment. Workers trampled through neighboring yards without permission. Construction noise started well before the allowed 8 a.m. time specified in the HOA noise ordinance. Most surprising was the enormous tent structure being erected in her backyard, which clearly exceeded the height restrictions outlined in Section 4.7 of the HOA guidelines. "Different rules for different people," muttered Mr. Patel, as we both watched workers install decorative lighting on trees in the common area behind our houses. "Has been this way since she became president 6 years ago." One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from work to find an envelope slipped under my front door. The heavy cream paper bore my name in elegant calligraphy. My first thought was that it must be a wedding invitation, which seemed odd considering I barely knew the family. Perhaps this was Karen extending an olive branch after our somewhat tense introduction. I opened the envelope to find not an invitation, but a letter printed on the same heavy stationery. The contents made me read it twice to ensure I understood correctly. "Dear neighbor, as you are aware, my daughter's wedding will host 175 guests in our backyard on August 12th. Due to limited facilities and the outdoor nature of the event, we have arranged for overflow bathroom access in nearby homes. Your property has been selected to provide shower and restroom facilities for approximately 25-30 guests between the hours of 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. A schedule is attached indicating when your facilities will be needed. We appreciate your neighborly cooperation in making this special day a success. Keys can be provided to the coordinator, or you may choose to be present to assist guests. Sincerely, Patricia Winters, HOA President." Attached was an actual schedule with time slots for different guest groups to use my bathroom. The presumption was staggering. No request, just an expectation that I would open my private home to strangers during a party I was not even invited to attend. I walked directly to Karen's house, letter in hand, determined to politely but firmly decline this inappropriate request. She answered the door dressed in tennis whites, appearing mildly annoyed at the interruption. "Patricia, I received your letter about using my bathroom facilities during the wedding," I began, keeping my tone civil. "I am afraid that will not be possible. I am not comfortable having strangers in my home." Her pleasant expression vanished instantly. Everyone in this community is expected to be accommodating for special events. Your house is conveniently located and has the necessary facilities. "I understand this is important to you, but my home is private property," I explained. "Perhaps you could rent portable facilities for the overflow guests." "Portable toilets," she repeated, her voice rising with indignation. "At my daughter's wedding, that is absolutely out of the question. This neighborhood works because everyone contributes to the greater good." "I contribute through my dues and following the regulations, but this goes beyond reasonable expectations," I stated firmly. Her eyes narrowed. "You are new here. Perhaps you do not understand how things work in Oak Ridge Estates. The HOA has broad discretion to ensure community cooperation. Refusing a reasonable accommodation could be considered a violation of community standards. There is nothing in the HOA regulations about being required to open my home to strangers," I countered. She smiled thinly. "There are many ways to interpret our covenants. You will learn how things work around here, one way or another." As I walked back home, I felt a distinct chill despite the summer heat. The conversation had made one thing perfectly clear. This was not actually a request. It was a demand backed by an implicit threat, and I had just refused the most powerful person in the neighborhood. The retaliation began the very next morning. I opened my front door to find a red violation notice taped prominently to it. According to the citation, my lawn was 3.75 inches tall, precisely a quarter inch above the maximum allowed height. The fine was $75, due immediately. I measured my grass myself and found it well within regulation height, but paid the fine anyway to avoid further conflict. 2 days later, another notice appeared, this time claiming my mailbox was not the approved style despite being the original fixture that came with the house. The day after that, I was cited for excessive bird activity due to a small feeder hanging from my oak tree. Each violation came with increasing fines and stern warnings about compliance. I attempted to address these issues through proper channels, sending emails to the HOA board requesting an appeal. My emails went unanswered. When I called the HOA office, the secretary informed me that all appeals needed to be approved for review by the president. In other words, Karen controlled whether my complaints about her would even be heard. One evening while watering my flowers, my neighbor Jessica from 2 doors down approached cautiously, looking over her shoulder before speaking. "I saw the notices on your door," she said quietly. "You should know this has happened before. The Millers who lived in your house before you sold because of her. Before them, the Gonzalez family lasted only 8 months. Because they would not let her push them around?" I asked. Jessica nodded. "Karen targets anyone who challenges her authority. The board members are all her friends or people too afraid to vote against her. Most neighbors just comply with whatever she wants to avoid becoming her next project." Over the next several weeks, the situation deteriorated further. At the community pool, conversations stopped when I approached. Parents pulled their children away as if I carried some contagious disease. I later learned Karen had been spreading rumors, that I was hostile to children, that I had been seen taking photographs of other people's houses, that I had a history of legal troubles in my previous neighborhood. The isolation tactics would have been difficult enough, but the violation notices continued at an alarming rate. My front door wreaths were unapproved seasonal decorations. My garden hose was improperly stored despite being on a regulation hose reel. My garbage can was allegedly visible from the street even when it was stored in my garage. One Saturday morning, I was working in my backyard garden when I noticed something odd in the freshly mulched bed along the fence, footprints that were not mine. Following the trail, I discovered measuring tape marks on my deck posts and disturbed soil around my air conditioning unit. Someone had been in my backyard examining my property while I was away. Concerned, I installed a small security camera overlooking my backyard. 2 days later, the footage confirmed my suspicions. There on the screen was Karen herself, clipboard in hand, measuring the distance between my patio furniture and the property line. She examined my grill, took photos of my gardening shed, and even peered through my back windows. The footage timestamp showed 10:15 a.m., the middle of a workday when she knew I would be absent. My hands trembled with anger as I watched the recording. This was beyond harassment. It was trespassing and invasion of privacy. I saved multiple copies of the video and continued recording, capturing 2 more unauthorized visits over the next week. During each visit, she seemed increasingly emboldened, once even testing my back door handle to see if it was unlocked. I consulted my neighbor Jessica again, who had become my only ally in the neighborhood. "Be careful how you use that footage," she warned. "Her husband is a partner at the largest law firm in the county. They sued the previous HOA treasurer who questioned her expense reports. The legal fees bankrupted him. So I just let her trespass on my property whenever she wants," I asked incredulously. Jessica looked down. "Most people here have simply accepted that Karen operates by different rules. Fighting her directly has not ended well for anyone." The wedding was now just 3 weeks away. Each day brought new violation notices, each more absurd than the last. My mailbox was now apparently improperly anchored. My house numbers were non-compliant font. My doorbell was an unapproved style. The fines now totaled over $1,000, with threats of liens against my property if not paid promptly. Each night I came home with a growing sense of dread, wondering what new violation would be waiting. The dream home I had saved for had become a source of anxiety rather than joy. I felt like a prisoner in my own house, constantly under surveillance and judgment. This was no longer about a shower request or petty HOA rules. This was about power and control, and Karen was determined to show me the consequences of defying her authority. The question was no longer whether I could peacefully coexist with her, but whether I could survive in this neighborhood at all. As July turned to August, the wedding preparations intensified. Heavy equipment rumbled down our street at all hours. Workers constructed an elaborate wooden platform in Karen's backyard that clearly violated height restrictions. String lights appeared on trees throughout the common areas. A massive refrigerated truck hummed loudly in her driveway, running 24 hours a day despite noise ordinances. Meanwhile, my situation grew increasingly untenable. The violation notices continued, now arriving daily. My hedges were allegedly uneven. My welcome mat was not from the approved color palette. The paint on my shutters, though identical to others in the neighborhood, was suddenly deemed non-compliant. The accumulated fines now exceeded $2,000. The August HOA meeting was scheduled for the Tuesday evening before the wedding. I arrived early, taking a seat near the back of the community center meeting room. The space filled quickly, with more residents in attendance than I had seen at previous meetings. Karen sat at the center of the head table, flanked by board members who seemed more like courtiers than community representatives. After covering routine business, Karen moved to special community announcements on the agenda. She stood, smoothing her immaculate blazer before addressing the room with practiced authority. "As you all know, my daughter Madison is getting married this Saturday in what will be the social event of the season for our community," she began, beaming with pride. "The board has approved several temporary accommodations to ensure the event proceeds smoothly." She proceeded to list street parking exceptions, noise ordinance waivers, and extended hours for vendors, all special allowances that would have resulted in hefty fines for any other resident. "Additionally," she continued, her gaze finding me in the back row, "we have arranged for overflow facilities at select homes to accommodate our guests. I want to personally thank those neighbors who have generously offered their homes for this purpose." My blood ran cold as heads turned in my direction. She was publicly announcing my cooperation without my consent, effectively boxing me into a corner. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I have not agreed to open my home for the wedding." The room fell silent. Karen's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "I believe we discussed this arrangement some time ago," she replied smoothly. "The facility's assignments have already been distributed to guests." "I clearly declined that request," I stated firmly. "My home will not be available." Karen tilted her head slightly, her voice taking on a concerned tone that sounded rehearsed. "This is disappointing. Community cooperation is the foundation of our neighborhood values. Perhaps you have not fully integrated into our community spirit yet." Several board members nodded in agreement. From around the room came murmurs of disapproval, not directed at Karen's presumption, but at my refusal. "I am happy to cooperate with reasonable requests and rules," I responded, trying to keep my voice level. "Opening my private home to strangers is not reasonable, nor is it required under any HOA regulation." "The board has broad authority to request temporary accommodations during community events," Karen countered, her tone growing sharper. "Your continued resistance suggests a concerning pattern of uncooperative behavior, as evidenced by your numerous violations." Mr. Davis, a board member I recognized as Karen's frequent golf partner, spoke up. "Perhaps we should discuss the outstanding violations and potential consequences at our next enforcement committee meeting." The threat was barely veiled. From around the room, I received looks ranging from sympathy to open hostility. Only Jessica met my eyes with understanding. After the meeting, I drove straight to a lawyer's office I had researched earlier that week. Despite the late hour, attorney Raymond Chen had agreed to see me as an emergency consultation. I brought my HOA documents, the violation notices, and the bathroom request letter. After reviewing the materials for 30 minutes, he looked up with a reassuring smile. "The good news is that they have absolutely no legal right to demand use of your private residence," he stated confidently. "The bad news is that HOAs have considerable power when it comes to enforcement of actual regulations. Some of these violation notices appear legitimate, while others are clearly retaliatory." "So what can I do?" I asked, feeling simultaneously relieved and concerned. "I can send a cease and desist letter regarding the trespassing and the bathroom demand," he explained. "As for the violations, we can contest them formally, but that process takes time. My advice is to document everything meticulously." The following afternoon, I encountered Madison, Karen's daughter, at the community mailboxes. She was chatting excitedly on her phone about wedding details. "The caterer says everything is on schedule," she bubbled into the phone. "And Mom solved the bathroom situation. The house with the blue shutters will have 3 bathrooms available for the Hendersons and the Lambert group." My house. She was describing my house, with its distinctive navy blue shutters. Despite my explicit refusal, despite the lawyer's letter that had been delivered that morning, they were still planning to direct wedding guests to my home. That evening, I stood at my kitchen window watching workers assemble a massive tent that now stretched from Karen's backyard toward the property line nearest mine. String lights crisker the space, and flooring had been laid over her entire lawn. Through the trees, I could see her directing workers with the authority of a military general, occasionally pointing toward my property. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. Karen had no intention of respecting my refusal. She fully expected that I would either surrender to her demands or face consequences severe enough to force my compliance. She believed her power in the neighborhood was absolute, that the rules existed for others but not for her. In that moment, Something shifted inside me. The anxiety and frustration of the past weeks crystallized into determination. I would not be bullied out of my dream home. I would not allow my boundaries to be trampled. The question was no longer whether I should stand my ground, but how to do it effectively. I turned away from the window, my mind racing with possibilities. If traditional approaches would not work, perhaps it was time for a more creative solution. Karen had spent weeks using the HOA rulebook as a weapon against me. Perhaps it was time to examine that same rulebook for opportunities rather than restrictions. I spent that night poring over the HOA regulations, searching for anything that might help me protect my property. Section after section detailed restrictions and limitations, but provided few protections for homeowners against overreach. By 2 a.m., my eyes were burning from reading the dense legal text, and my kitchen table was covered with highlighted documents and scribbled notes. Taking a break, I scrolled mindlessly through social media, trying to clear my head. An advertisement caught my attention, a local company specializing in property maintenance systems, with an image of water spraying from roof edges. The caption read, "Keep your roof and gutters clean year-round with our automated maintenance systems." Something clicked in my mind. I began researching roof cleaning systems, which led me to specialized sprinkler systems designed for homes in wildfire-prone areas. These systems could create a protective water barrier around an entire property. Most importantly, nowhere in the HOA regulations was there any prohibition against roof maintenance equipment. The next morning, I called 3 different companies that installed such systems. The first 2 seemed confused by my specific requirements. The third company, however, was run by a man named Rick who immediately understood my situation. "HOA problems, huh?" he asked knowingly after I explained what I needed without divulging the full reason. "I have seen this before. You want protection that stays within the rules." Rick arrived that afternoon to assess my property. A burly man with a salt and pepper beard, he walked the perimeter of my house, measuring and making notes. "Your roof structure is perfect for what we call a perimeter defense system," he explained. "We can install discrete sprinkler heads along your roof line that, when activated, will create a complete water curtain around your property." "How much control would I have over the system?" I asked. Rick smiled. "Complete control. The whole system connects to a smartphone app. You can activate all zones or individual sections with one tap. You can set timers, control water pressure, everything. Plus, it is all legitimate roof and gutter maintenance equipment, which would be difficult for anyone to object to." The cost was significant, nearly $5,000 for the complete system. But at this point, I considered it an investment in my sanity and autonomy. I signed the contract that day, with Rick promising expedited installation to be completed within 5 days. True to his word, Rick and his team worked efficiently. They installed discrete sprinkler heads along my roofline, positioned specifically to create overlapping water coverage around my entire property perimeter. They buried supply lines, installed a smart control system in my garage, and carefully tested each zone to ensure proper coverage without excessive water usage. "This is actually one of our more sophisticated installations," Rick commented on the final day as he demonstrated the control app on my phone. "Slide this bar to adjust water pressure. This button activates all zones simultaneously. These individual buttons control specific areas if you only want to target one side of the property." I watched in satisfaction as he demonstrated a test spray, sending a perfect curtain of water cascading from my roofline to create a vertical barrier about 7 feet from my house foundations. The water volume was impressive without being wasteful, creating a genuine deterrent that would make crossing the barrier uncomfortable but not dangerous. Remember, this is designed as a maintenance system for cleaning your roof and gutters, Rick said with a knowing wink as he packed up his tools. Any other use would be entirely coincidental. While the installation was underway, I took additional precautions. I photographed every step of the process, documenting that all work complied with building codes and did not violate any HOA restrictions. I researched similar systems installed in other communities and printed manufacturer specifications highlighting the legitimate maintenance purposes. Finally, I drafted a formal notice to the HOA board. This letter serves as notification that roof maintenance equipment has been installed at 427 Oak Ridge Lane. The system is fully compliant with all building codes and does not violate any HOA regulations regarding external modifications, as it qualifies as temporary maintenance equipment under Section 7.3 of the HOA Covenant. Regular maintenance testing will occur periodically, including this coming weekend. I sent the letter via certified mail to each board member, including Karen, ensuring delivery confirmation. I also posted the required notification of maintenance activity on the community bulletin board, following protocol for any property maintenance. The evening before the wedding, I conducted a final test of the system. Standing in my driveway, I activated the app and watched as water sprayed in a perfect curtain around my property. The coverage was complete. Anyone attempting to approach my house would have to pass through a substantial water barrier. I adjusted the pressure to ensure it was not dangerous but certainly uncomfortable enough to deter unwanted visitors. As darkness fell, I sat on my front porch and observed the frantic last-minute wedding preparations at Karen's house. Vehicles came and went, delivering flowers, audio equipment, and other supplies. Work lights illuminated her backyard as the final touches were put on the elaborate tent and dance floor. Through it all, Karen moved with practiced authority, directing workers and seemingly oblivious to the fact that her bathroom plan was about to quite literally hold no water. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, the control app for my new roof maintenance system, charging on my nightstand beside me. Tomorrow would bring Karen's carefully planned wedding day and my carefully planned defense of my boundaries. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine whether rules and respect would prevail, or whether power and presumption would continue to reign in Oak Ridge Estates. Wedding day arrived with picture-perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, and temperatures in the mid-70s. From my bedroom window, I watched the controlled chaos unfold across the neighborhood. Florists arrived at dawn, caterers established stations under the massive tent, and string musicians set up near an elaborately decorated arch. By noon, Karen was directing operations like a field general, clipboard in hand, coordinating with an army of vendors. Her powder blue pantsuit made her easy to spot as she moved purposefully through the preparations. Occasionally, she glanced toward my house, her expression a mixture of annoyance and determination. At 3 o'clock, the ceremony began. Though I could not see the actual proceedings from my vantage point, the string quartet music drifted clearly through the neighborhood. By 4:30, applause indicated the conclusion of the ceremony, and guests began to move toward the reception area. The celebration was in full swing by 5, with approximately 150 well-dressed guests mingling under the tent and across Karen's expanded backyard space. I positioned myself strategically by my front window, control app in hand, watching and waiting. I did not have to wait long. At precisely 5:45, I observed Karen speaking to a group of guests, gesturing emphatically toward my house. A moment later, a cluster of 6 guests in formal attire began walking along the path that connected our properties. My heart pounded as I watched them approach with the confidence of people who believed they had permission to enter. The woman leading the group wore an elaborate fascinator hat and carried a small clutch purse. Behind her, a man in a gray suit checked his watch impatiently. I stepped onto my front porch, making myself visible, but remaining behind the invisible line where my sprinkler system would activate. "May I help you?" I called out politely as they approached. The woman looked startled to see me. "Oh, hello. Karen said we could use your facilities for the wedding." "I am afraid there has been a misunderstanding," I replied. "My home is not open to wedding guests." The woman frowned. "But Karen specifically told us to come here. She said it was all arranged." "I am sorry for the confusion, but no such arrangement exists," I explained calmly. "You should return to the reception and use the facilities there." The man in the gray suit stepped forward. "Look, we were told this would not be a problem. We just need to use the bathroom quickly." As they continued advancing toward my property line, I held up my phone. "Please, stop where you are. I am about to activate my roof maintenance system for a scheduled cleaning." They exchanged confused glances but continued forward. I pressed the activation button. Instantly, water sprayed from the roofline, creating a perfect curtain that surrounded my property. The group jumped back in surprise, the woman with the fascinator squealing as water droplets reached her elaborate headpiece. "What in the world?" the man in the gray suit exclaimed. "Roof maintenance system," I explained pleasantly. "For cleaning gutters and roof tiles. I sent formal notice to the HOA last week about the scheduled maintenance." The group retreated hastily, several of them already reaching for their phones. I knew exactly who they would be calling. Less than 10 minutes later, Karen herself appeared, marching toward my house with fury etched on her face. She wore a different outfit now, an elegant mother-of-the-bride dress that appeared quite expensive. She stopped just short of the water curtain, her hands on her hips. "Turn this off immediately," she demanded, her voice shrill with anger. "Good afternoon, Patricia," I replied calmly. "I am conducting scheduled maintenance on my roof system. I filed the proper notification with the HOA board last week." "This is deliberate sabotage of my daughter's wedding," she shouted, her composure completely gone. Her carefully styled hair was beginning to wilt in the humidity created by the water spray. "Not at all. This is legitimate property maintenance that complies with all HOA regulations," I responded. "Section 7.3 specifically allows for maintenance equipment without prior approval. I have documentation if you would like to see it." "You know perfectly well what you are doing," she hissed. "I will have you fined so severely you will be forced to sell." "Any such fines would be interesting to contest, especially with the evidence I have collected of your trespassing on my property," I replied, holding up my phone to indicate I was recording our conversation. "Not to mention the documentation of your selective enforcement of HOA rules." Karen took a step forward, perhaps forgetting the water barrier in her rage. The spray caught her directly, instantly dampening her expensive dress. She jumped back with a shriek of outrage. "This is assault," she screamed, mascara now running down her cheeks. "This is physics," I corrected calmly. "Water falls downward when sprayed from a roof. There are warning signs posted, and I am standing a safe distance away." By now, several wedding guests had gathered at a distance, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Karen became aware of the audience and attempted to collect herself, smoothing her now wet dress with shaking hands. "This is not over," she promised, her voice low and threatening. "Not by a long shot." "I have only just begun maintaining my property," I replied with a smile. "The forecast suggests I may need to continue this maintenance for the next 5 hours or so." Karen turned and stalked away, pulling out her phone. I had no doubt she was calling emergency board members or her lawyer husband. It made no difference. I had reviewed the regulations thoroughly, documented everything, and ensured my actions were defensible. Throughout the evening, I maintained the water barrier, adjusting zones as needed when I observed guests approaching from different angles. From behind my curtained windows, I watched the celebration continue, though with notably fewer attempts to access my property. The beautiful water curtain glistening in the evening light added a certain dramatic flair to the event, though probably not the aesthetic Karen had planned for her daughter's perfect day. The morning after the wedding, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The email notification cited urgent community matters requiring immediate attention. The meeting was scheduled for Monday evening at the community center. I spent Sunday organizing my evidence: the security footage of Karen trespassing, photographs of violations on her property that went unenforced, copies of the excessive and often fabricated violation notices against me, and documentation of my fully compliant sprinkler system. When Monday evening arrived, I entered the community center to find the room already packed. Nearly every homeowner in Oak Ridge Estates appeared to be present, creating a buzz of conversation that immediately hushed when I walked in. Karen sat at the head table, her expression stony. The other board members looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with the crowd. The meeting was called to order, and Karen immediately launched into what was clearly a prepared statement. "It has come to the board's attention that certain residents are installing hazardous equipment without proper oversight," she began. "Furthermore, this equipment was maliciously deployed during a community event, causing distress and potential danger to guests." Before she could continue her narrative, I raised my hand. "Point of order," I stated clearly. "According to HOA bylaws, any accusation against a specific resident must be supported by documentation, and that resident must be given equal time to respond." Mr. Patel, the elderly gentleman who lived next door to me, spoke up from his seat. "I second this point of order." Karen appeared momentarily flustered, but quickly regained her composure. "Very well. We have photographs of the water system that was activated during my daughter's wedding." She nodded to another board member who displayed several photos on the projector screen. When my turn came to speak, I approached the podium calmly, bringing my laptop and a folder of documents. "Thank you for the opportunity to address the community," I began. "I installed a roof and gutter maintenance system that is fully compliant with all building codes and HOA regulations. I properly notified the board of scheduled maintenance, as required by our bylaws." I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed the installation documentation, maintenance schedule notification, and relevant sections of the HOA regulations. However, this meeting provides an opportunity to address some broader concerns about how our HOA is being managed, I continued. "Over the past months, I have experienced targeted harassment that I believe undermines the community values we all share." I proceeded to show the security footage of Karen entering my backyard without permission on multiple occasions. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room.